Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. Thomas Miller, Robert Glasscock. We have a precious question. I love this so much.
So I was making a haircut appointment the other day, and it occurred to me to look at the transits and see if it made more sense to do it on one day versus another. And I wanted to ask if you had any suggestions for this sort of an election. I did end up going with a Libra rising, and I think the moon was in Pisces. But I also think I did it on an eclipse, so I don't know what's gonna happen to my hair. And this probably seems quite frivolous and maybe not the highest timeline, but anyway, I thought it would be interesting to see what you had to say about this. Thanks so much.
Robert, can astrology help us have a good haircut? I love that, especially Libra rising. I think she's on her way.
Well, as trivial as that may sound, it's really not. And I think whoever this listener is knows her astrology. If she's choosing a time to get a haircut that has the moon in Pisces, which is a sign, among other things, but Pisces rules makeup, cosmetics, beautifications, which includes haircuts and so on. So, and then Libra, of course, is Venus ruled, and it also rules beautification and the arts. So she chose a great time with the day where the moon is in Pisces and Libra happens to be on the ascendant. If she can set the appointment up for that, she's going to come out looking better than any haircut she's ever gotten.
Even on an eclipse, though, she said she might have
that
said
only
it on...
makes it more so to me.
All right, so have a great haircut, and I hope you'll call back and let us know how it went, too.
And you know, too, Thomas, since she mentioned it's an eclipse day, the moon is involved in that eclipse, either by conjunction or opposition, depending on what kind of eclipse it is. And since she chose a day where the moon is in Pisces and Libra is rising, the eclipse only makes it more emphatic. So she couldn't have chosen a better time. The eclipse just emphasizes and strengthens and accentuates whatever's going on. So in her case, she needs to get some photographs once she's gotten this haircut and use them as a headshot.
Okay, then why do people fear eclipses so much?
I don't know. I think from antiquity, if you can imagine being a primitive human being and some wise man, some wizard who happens to be an astrologer, tells you, on Friday, I'm going to make the sun go dark. And it does. Suddenly, everybody, the whole tribe, imparts godlike qualities to this man who made the sun go dark. So it has a lot, and it is. It's as any of us who watched this last eclipse, which was magnificent, know, it's just a soul-stirring experience to watch that happen. So it's, I guess, since antiquity, been associated with very powerful, otherworldly sources that are beyond the normal human comprehension and that are very godlike and therefore very fated and fatalistic. And I think those associations have accrued with it. But all it is, really astrologically, is an aspect of realization. You've got the sun conjunct or opposite the moon, either one. And so it's an aspect of awareness and emphasis because they are rare in the sense of they're not daily. So when they happen, they emphasize the signs that are involved as well as the houses in your own horoscope that are involved. So a sun-moon opposition eclipse will involve a pair of houses, an axis in your horoscope that's very important and probably undergoing an important realization about those house matters. A sun conjunct the moon eclipse will accent the house in which that occurs. And it's meant to emphasize those house matters so that you pay deep attention to those house matters because they will be life-changing to some extent. So I guess that's where a lot of people associate fear with them because of a failure to understand the fundamental truth, which is that we, as human individuals, and the planets in our solar system are not separate. We are the same thing, just on vastly different scales. We all have a sun and moon in our horoscopes, in our souls, in our makeup. We're connected to the sun and the moon viscerally. They're not separate from us. So there's nothing to fear in any astrological configuration, because what's going on in the solar system applies to me as an individual and to you as an individual. And you can understand it, whatever the configuration is, on a very personal, intimate level. But it does require thinking, pondering, maybe analyzing, and consciousness. That's the whole point of astrology, is to make you conscious of everything in your horoscope so that none of the horoscope has any unconscious power to undermine you anymore. And it's a lifelong process. You don't do this overnight, but that's the message.
You mentioned that story of the wizard back in the day using his powers to usurp the people. Makes me think of that story that I love. It's so practical of how we are as humans. The young couple, she was going to fix tenderloin for a Sunday lunch, have the family over, and she whacked the ends of the tenderloin off before she put it in the pan to put it in the oven. And her husband says, "Why do you do that? That's good meat. Why did you cut that off? That's the ends." She said, "Oh, my mother always cut off the ends of the tenderloin before she cooked it." So they went to Mom, and, "Mom, why do you cut the ends of the tenderloin off?" She said, "Oh, my mother always did that since I was a little girl. It's been doing it for all these years." So they went to Grandma. "Hey, Grandma, why do you cut the ends off of your tenderloin before you bake it?" "Oh, well, that was back during the Depression. We couldn't afford a bigger pan. I had a small pan. I had to cut it off and get it in the oven."
Yep. That's hysterical.
So it's like, be careful what you do. That's, don't listen to the medicine man if he's fooling you. Okay, so then the other question that this brings is, obviously, how do we use electional astrology? I mean, how far do we take this? Down to haircuts. I mean, that's really applying the chart to daily life. How far do you take electional type decisions like that?
Well, electional can veer over into horary very easily. I just used horary yesterday. I don't use it often for myself because I don't have major decisions to make as a rule. I'll use it to decide what kind of a car to buy or whether to lease or buy a car, which I've mentioned innumerable times. And yesterday I happened to be in a jewelry store that I have been working with for probably 15 years. And one of the women in the shop had shown me a piece that I really liked. I don't need it. Nobody needs jewelry in the way that you need food and water. But I really liked it. But it was expensive for me, fairly expensive. And I like to think things over. But of course, I've got ephemeris on my iPhone, and she knows this. And I took out my phone after looking at this piece for a while and putting it on and studying it and thinking about it. Thinking, "Oh, I don't need this. I don't need this." But I really like it. So I whipped out my phone, and she said, "Are you looking at your chart?" I said, "Of course." "Well, it's an horary chart. It's called Sky Now. So it shows the horoscope for the moment, where I am, and you can do it at a glance. And luxury items, which are ruled by the fifth house, I just instantly looked. And the fifth house was ruled by Pisces in that chart. And the opposite house, the house of the immediate outcome. This is horary astrology, not electional. The opposite house is Virgo. So Mercury and Jupiter, which happened to be in sextile. So I didn't even hesitate. I said, "Let's do it." So I did. And I've used it that way all my life, really, since I discovered horary and how helpful and accurate it can be. But generally, I've never thought about using it for a haircut. I get my hair cut about every 3 weeks because I have a certain length. I kind of like to keep it in what hair I have left. So you have to be careful with it. But it's a very valid question, and I loved her use of it. Women's hair is important. And I think she used it very well to decide to elect a day in a time where Libra's rising and the moon's in Pisces. She must know astrology pretty well.
Yeah, that was a good pick right off the bat. So this also gets into kind of a fate, free will kind of thing. That, let's go back to Paramahansa Yogananda. He would have said, I'm going to go get a haircut, and it's going to be the best haircut I've ever gotten in my life.
That's right.
Right, off of intention. So how do we balance that? Because there is energy in the sky. I mean, we know that. We see it every day. And like what she's trying to do is harness that energy for her benefit and just surf the wave of energy that's there. She picked a great time. She'll probably have a wonderful outcome. But she also could use a powerful intention. What do you think about the contrast of those two?
Well, it's really the question that you posed right at the top of this, fate and free will. And I don't know, Thomas, but I have, and I'm certainly not alone, philosophers for millennia have talked about this. If you are born without a limb, that's fate. You don't have an arm. Your response to that is free will. There are people who will go through life missing an arm, feeling terrible about it, sad. Nobody will love me. Nobody will want me. I will be a failure. Other people will grow up and get to an age in youth or a little older and say, wait a minute, there's an artificial, look at this. I can get a bionic arm for $30,000, which insurance will pay for. And basically it does everything that a real arm does. So they won't let that so-called handicap stop them in the least. And that's free will. Deeper than that, though, and you understand this with metaphysics, the soul chooses to be born. It's not forced on anybody. You choose when you come in, what era you're born, what geographical region you're born, what parents you're born to. And it's a wonderful way to look at life. Instead of blaming your parents or blaming your horoscope, to realize you chose this. It was a conscious choice on your soul's part. So all of these aspects in your chart, good, bad, or non-existent, the time is a choice that you made. And everybody, well, what about karma? Karma is also, the word itself is an old Sanskrit word, which simply means the results of past actions. Well, those can be actions yesterday, or they can be actions in 3 lifetimes ago. But the word itself just means results of past actions. So it's not that God or fate forces you to come back. If you mistreated your wife in a previous life, you're going to come back and be mistreated by your wife in this life. That's so simplistic. But your soul may realize, I mistreated my wife in a former life. I want to come back and redo this and see if I can do better in this life. So when you begin to look at fate and free will as really an opposition, opposite ends of the same polarity, the whole point of living, and certainly of astrology and metaphysics, is to get more and more and more conscious of your own connection with the all that is, and therefore your own power. It's not power over anybody. It's power of self-realization. And that's where Swami Paramahansa comes in. Self-realization.
Yeah, I like the blend. You know, to me, I spent about 8 months down there in St. Augustine, Florida, and would watch the surfers when the weather got a little bit inclement. That's what they liked. You know, they liked the gray, windy day, and they'd go out and hit it and gun it. And you'd see them paddle out there, and then they're looking. And, of course, I've never done that. They know what they're looking for. And boy, when they saw one, they'd start swimming in that direction, and they'd get out there and they'd stand up on that wave and ride that thing all the way in. And it was fun to watch. And I just thought, boy, that's exactly the combination of you want to know from astrology where the waves are, and then you get on that board and you say, this is going to be a great ride, and then you take off. I think that's a good way to
Yeah.
I've used it in that way of like, hey, why buck the trend or buck the wind of the prevailing energy? Just get on it. And that's what she's doing, is finding a good time when the energy is there. Now go have a good haircut.
Absolutely right. The other thing, too, I have found with myself and certainly with clients, a lot of people, and especially some branches of psychology, you can spend hours and even years talking about what your parents did to you. And or with astrology, you can examine it from an objective perspective through the horoscope and look at the effects of your parents on you and realize that you are born through those parents and you have the same elements in you on a different and more evolved, let's say. So that's important, I think, to realize that we're not victims of our circumstances. We chose those, our soul did, to see if we could learn from them and evolve beyond them. And that's the purpose of all of this, I think.
Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. We are my favorite quote. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And if we keep that focus, it all clicks together. Robert, thank you. And to our wonderful listener, thank you. And I'd love to see a picture of this haircut. Maybe we could get that someday. Thank you so much for listening. And all of the information that you would need about what we have going on here is in the show notes, as always. And we'll see you next time on the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology podcast with Robert Glasscock.